Corduroy, it's a word with many meanings. There's this beer, which, as it tells me on the label, is full-bodied with a peppery spiciness which balances the bitterness of the citrus and floral aromatics. And here I thought it was just beer. Okay, not your kind of corduroy? Well then, what about this as a way for a man or a woman to look their best? Rich and masculine. Now there's a goal. Still not working for you? Well, how about this? The muddiest, slipperiest, nastiest, and longest running motorcycle enduro in the country. Now that's a close second to rich and masculine. El Camino is brought to you by Yamaha, revs your heart. Importations Thibault, distributor of power sports parts and accessories. And by GP Bikes, Canada's power sports authority. Welcome to El Camino. The year was 1953, and Ron Jackson and Don Charters of the British Empire Motor Club rode their motorcycles to the Glen Eagle Hotel on the outskirts of Toronto. Pretty soon others arrived too, and this was the directive given to everyone. Bring enough money for gas to ride 500 miles. There was no mention of money for food or hotels or anything superfluous. Now remember, this was back when men were men. Hell, in 1953, even the women were men. If you knew my Aunt Irene, you'd know exactly what I was talking about. Why were these motorcyclists meeting in the parking lot of the Glen Eagle Hotel? For the very first Corduroy Enduro. And the fee to compete was $1. Man, if they had Facebook back then, everyone would have been outraged. $1! Nobody thinks about the little guy, do they? And unlike today, where just about everyone misses the good old days of, hand-washing laundry, iced-up carburetors, and rotary dial telephones, there was a huge degree of enthusiasm for the future back then. Nobody in 1953 missed the good old days. When you're less than a decade away from a world war, the good old days weren't so good. In 1953, motorcycling in this country was just finding its feet. Servicemen and servicewomen had returned to civilian life and settled into good jobs. The middle class was thriving. Moreover, these men and women were aware of the world beyond. And even those who were too young to have served in the war, like a young Bill Sharpless, were hell-bent on adventure. Sharpless was one of those who met that day at the Glen Eagle Hotel, and he told journalist John Cooper that it sounded like just the perfect thing for a teenager on a 500 Norton. The first Corduroy was hell. And no combination of rich or masculine was enough to make it less miserable. Mile after mile of trails and power lines and river crossings and bug-infested swamps and those infamous Halliburton rocks, which, once they've been rained on, are as slippery as greased tinfoil. Things really began to get spicy once darkness set in. Sharpless, like most of the other competitors, had stripped his street bike of unnecessary equipment to make it lighter. The headlight, of course, was the first thing to go. There they were, all of these riders, stuck in the woods, none of them with a headlight, with many miles still to go. And now, just as a man stranded in the desert sees a mirage with a swimming pool and a waiter holding a tray aloft with a shaken, not stirred martini, the stranded riders began to hallucinate, to see things that couldn't possibly be there, like a motorcycle coming through the woods toward them with a bright headlight. But this was no apparition. It was just little Ken Aston on his Vincent Black Shadow, a machine that today is worth the king's ransom. But with Aston leading the way, the riders trailed him to the end of the line. On just the Saturday alone, the Corduroy then, as now, is over 2 days, Sharpless rode 283 miles in 9 hours and 26 minutes. And then the next morning, he bolted his headlight back on and rode home. Just like my Aunt Irene would have done, in a dress, with a Craven A menthol hanging from her lips, cursing like a sailor all the way. Bill Sharpless went on to win the Corduroy 3 times before retiring, and starting a second career where he went out to stud, siring offspring that went on to become some of Canada's most successful motorcycle racers in flat track, road racing, and of course, Enduro. Blair Sharpless won the Corduroy 7 times, and today, all these years later, the Corduroy continues as an annual event. Missing only 2 years. Well, blame COVID for one of those cancellations, but the other cancellation took place under mysterious circumstances. The year was 1969. And my guess is that everyone was just having too good of a time to bother putting fuel in the tank and air in the tires and, socks on your feet. And oh baby, don't I know what it feels like when you lose the motivation to get dressed first thing in the afternoon. Today, Blair Sharpless is the man behind the Corduroy. He brings us up to date.
Back when I first started riding this, the machinery wasn't anywhere near as good. And so even the best rider could only go so fast across this rough terrain. Now the machinery is so good, the top rider is so much faster than the novice. The novice is going the same speed as a novice did in the 60s or 70s, but the top guys are going 4 times faster.
An event of this size is a huge undertaking. Sharpless, again, gives us the bullet points.
We're very fortunate putting this event on in this location. The Highlands East is where we are, but it's still a lot of work. And we start working on this pretty well when we finish. It's not a hugely populated area, a lot of cottage and vacation properties. And so that's good too, because there's a lot of open land and to use, and very welcoming people up here in the townships, easy to work with. They see the benefit of bringing people here. Also, it's positioned properly on the calendar, because this is cottage country in Ontario, where all the lakes are. But cottage country generally ends the end of August, because it starts to get cool normally, and then we're before hunting season.
Between cottage season and hunting season, which means this: don't get lost in the woods without a headlight after dark, because the next person you might see could be someone with a rifle tempting you out of the trees with a carrot. Don't fall for it. It's a trick. This segment is brought to you by Yamaha. Welcome back to El Camino. It's the sheer size of the Corduroy that impresses. You've got old stuff and new stuff, and by the way, did you know that this Harley-Davidson Pan America has a mailbox right under the headlight? Letters are collected twice weekly. And if you're riding and you need motivation, check this out. The trophies. Woody, or veer off course, hit a tree, and you may not win that trophy, but perhaps you'll win this trophy. Yes, a cast. It'll be a perfect match for the one in your leg. John Sherrard understands the Corduroy as well as anyone, and he should. He runs a suspension business, and he knows what's in store out in the woods.
This area of Canada is incredible for the variety of terrain, and this event is incredible for the variety of terrain. There's some years they've had, out of 300, 400, 500 competitors, they may have 30% finish. So it is a tough event. I've come across people mentally and physically exhausted and have given up.
Physically and emotionally defeated. Now, I'm totally down with tormenting myself, so John, tell me a little more.
So Blair Sharpless has been the driving force behind this event for years, and I used to think he would find the most difficult way to get from point A to point B. If there was a cliff face, we went up it. If there was a fallen tree, we went over it. If there was a swamp, we went through it. So it never surprises me what we see. So the event is very, very tough. I've crossed swamps where someone has put an extension ladder down, and you're crossing a 30-foot extension ladder with no room to put your feet down, so you have to commit and go. I've come to slippery wooden bridges, mud holes with a rock cliff on the other side, so where you have to build momentum where there's none to be had. So it really tests the rider's ability. Many people that I know have attempted the race 2, 3, 4 times and have never finished it. It is a tough event. So just I would recommend if it was your first time, your goal should be to finish the event. Try to prepare mentally, physically, and mechanically to just finish the event.
So what I'm hearing is this: to finish, just to finish, is to win. Even if you don't win, but win, lose, draw, or break your leg, you've got to start. Let's talk about what goes through the mind of a rider before the start of a race. Now, of course, everyone is different. Nerves are a funny thing. Some riders, well, they can't shut up. They'll talk to anyone. They'll talk to trees, to the big man in the sky, or to the man down below with the pointed tail. For many of us, and I include myself, staging for a race is gloriously terrifying. Do you remember the cast, the Hard Luck Award? That's not a joke. Tree limbs are not the only thing that are going to get broken this weekend. But mostly the feelings on the starting line are of nervous expectation. You see, in racing, unlike team sports, there's no one else to blame for your poor performance. And it doesn't matter if your mom thinks you've done well. What matters is if you think you've done well. And I've never met a motorcycle racer who didn't have outsized expectations. Over dinner the night before, a racer might say to their wife or to their husband things like, "I really just want to finish and enjoy the day." Or, "It's just an honor to compete." Or, "I just want to be the best I can be on that day." Well, I'm here to tell you that all that Buddhist bullshit is nothing more than a smokescreen to hide what's lurking deep down in your soul. And what is that? It's the feeling that you're going to humiliate yourself, that your training over the long winter will be for naught, and that who you really are, a talentless hack, will be on display for everyone to see. This doesn't happen in team sports. Now, even a goalie, you can choose the sport, who we tend to think of as slightly separate from their teams, is still dependent on teammates to fend off opponents. Of course, that doesn't happen in racing. New motorcycles are so capable and so reliable, you can't blame it on the bike, though of course people try. But as racers, our expectations are always slightly, or not so slightly, beyond what we're capable of. And sometimes, well, you just have an off day, or a day when everything comes together so beautifully that if you didn't wake the next morning, well, you wouldn't care. Who doesn't want to go out on a high note? The racers you see here are nervous because they don't know what today is going to hold. Now, even a blessing by the Father for your sins is coming too late to do any good, because they don't know how they'll react when they come to a steep, off-camber hill that wants to punt them into the shrubs. Or worse, they don't yet know if they'll whoop inside their helmets and drop down a gear and twist the throttle and soar over the top, or if they'll hesitate and question their skill set and feel the tension in their arms. You see it in riders who pause at the bottom of a steep climb, or worse, those who come to a full stop. It's always done under the guise of, checking out the obstacle. But there's nothing to be gained from this. You're far better off to throw your body at what's in front of you and live with the results. Now, of course, it's easy for me to say. I know, I've done both. I've hesitated and I've forged on with reckless abandon. But know this, there are those days that whatever you do, it's going to be the wrong approach. But there are also days when everything works out so beautifully that you can't believe it. And of course, that's why we keep coming back for more. Or if you don't want to be judged, you can do this. A handful of manufacturers, Kawasaki, KTM, Yamaha, and others, bring demo bikes to the Corduroy, and you can potter around on a little closed course and then kick back with a beer and be part of the whole event. Now, the great thing about demo rides is that those brand reps, well, they have to be nice to you. You're a potential customer. And here's the best part. You can bore them with your stories of how you used to rip up the neighborhood when you were 9 on a YZ80. And they don't have to know that you haven't ridden since you were 10, or that you really weren't very good back then, or that truthfully you didn't even own a YZ80. You owned a bicycle. And the YZ80 was owned by a girl named Carrie from the next block over, and that for a very brief moment, Carrie, she was the real deal. She could work a clutch. Well, Carrie had a crush on you, up until you proved that you couldn't work a clutch. and then her crush on you died the 11th time you stalled the bike. And here I've carried this with me all these years. It's just a story. It's not true. This segment is brought to you by Best Western Hotels and Resorts. Welcome back to El Camino. Where was I? Oh yeah, let's move on. The Corduroy Enduro is held in a town, well, it's not even a town really, but it's called Gooderham. It's in the Haliburton Highlands. It's a wild place. How wild? I was riding a street bike just a few miles outside the village when I hit a deer. The deer ended up in a field, and I ended up in the ditch. And while I was sitting on the shoulder of the road, composing myself, a pickup slowed down and stopped. I was just about to thank them for their concern when the driver said, "Where's the deer?" I got defensive. "It's my deer," I said. They drove away in a huff. And then I stood, and the deer, who I thought was dead, also stood. Our eyes met in a meaningful moment, man and beast as one. And then the deer crossed back across the road and nearly got hit again. What has the story got to do with the Corduroy Enduro? Very little, except to illustrate that the region is inhospitable for motorcyclists, which makes it ideal for an enduro. Does this seem like a contradiction? Not at all. The Corduroy is what's called a hard enduro. Well, that should be self-evident by now. A hard enduro requires terrain that's hard to ride through. Earlier, John Sherrard talked about what a rider sees at the Corduroy, but words alone do not do the terrain justice. Have you ever ridden in sand? If you're a street rider, maybe not. Let me give you a primer. If you've walked down a flight of stairs with your pants around your ankles, you're getting close to the sensation of riding in sand. It begins with the front wheel of your motorcycle. It stops communicating. Now, in a modern parlance, it ghosts you. And then your body betrays you. Even if you know that you should keep your arms loose and your eyes up and your legs braced to the flanks of the machine, you can't. Because you feel like you're on one of those round toboggans that spins as you descend the icy hill. You know the kind I'm talking about, the little death circles that invariably spin your back to face the trees. Sand riding requires nerves of steel, a heavy application of throttle, and faith in your skills. All of the things that those of us with modest skill sets could use just a little more of. A day spent riding in sand isn't so different as a day spent having your taxes audited. Both can be humiliating. Even if you're a master of sand, which seems impossible, but those people exist, you're not off the hook. Think back to geography class, to the Canadian Shield, that formation of exposed continental crust that's been haunting motorcyclists for the last billion years. That's billion with a B. The Corduroy is tough to ride now, but just imagine what it must have been like before long travel suspensions, or monoshocks, or disc brakes, or brakes at all, or suspensions, or the wheel, or humanity. Oh, the inhumanity. This segment is brought to you by GP Bikes. Welcome back to El Camino. Don't think the Corduroy is just for experts. Sharpless and Company know that to attract 800, give or take, riders, it's necessary to have a route that you can at least have a hope to finish. At the Corduroy, there isn't just one way to go. There are multiple color-coded trails that align with your class. The pros and the experts receive all the misery that the Haliburton Highlands can offer. But the vets and the kids get to miss the worst of it. And with riders of varying skill sets from ages 16 well into their 70s, if there was only the toughest trail, they'd be pulling bodies out of the woods well into winter. Compared to most forms of motorcycle competition, enduros, and this covers everything from major global rallies down to the Corduroy, have something called an impound area. As if bashing through the woods isn't hard enough, between day 1 and day 2, you have to park your bike in a designated area where you don't have access to it, which severely limits your ability to fix all the things that have been broken or bent. But let's say that you're a motorcycling genius and that you didn't fall over or club a tree. You're still not off the hook. This rider is tightening spokes. And if your spokes are coming loose, just think what this is doing to your internal organs, like those squishy bits in your back, or your kidneys, or your whatevers. If you're new to motorcycling, you may think, if you've made it this far, that I've painted a picture of an event that exists simply to humiliate a motorcyclist. Well, of course, that's true. But in that way, we motorcyclists have a perverse desire to torment ourselves. The difficulty of the Corduroy, well, that's the point of it. If it was easy, it'd be a Sunday afternoon trail ride. Even to enter the Corduroy is to show the world that you've got backbone, grit, tenacity. And to finish the Corduroy Enduro is a feather in a rider's cap. I don't care about pros and experts and who wins and who gets a tacky log trophy. Any kind of motorcycle competition is never truly about the competition. It's about yourself. How deep can you dig? How much resilience can you summon? How many times can you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep going? If you're following my line of thinking, you'll see a parallel here. Isn't the Corduroy a metaphor for life itself? How when we're faced with setbacks or tragedies that the human animal must simply gather ourselves up, lift our chins, and carry on. It's the most admirable characteristic of our deeply flawed humanity. Thank you for watching El Camino. Clothing was provided by Importations Tebow. El Camino has been brought to you by Best Western Hotels and Resorts. Wherever life takes you, Best Western is there. Bridgestone Race Tires, exclusively distributed by Importations Tebow. And by Spring Toronto Motorcycle Super Show.